In episode 1, it's September 1979, and in the Hawkins National Laboratory, we see gifted children in hospital gowns kind of play around in a playroom using their powers to play games. Dr. Brenner walks in then and takes one of the kids into an observation room to assess his abilities. They walk past 11's room on their way there. They're in the middle of their assessment, and there are suddenly loud screams, and the door comes flying off its hinges, knocking Dr. Brenner in the face. He runs out into the hallway, and all of the other kids and staff have been killed. They're all bloody, with their limbs twisted in the wrong direction. Then we see 11, bleeding from her eyes and ears, breathing heavy, seemingly the only one other than Dr. Brenner who has survived, and the doctor asks her then what she's done. In the present day, March 1986, Elle says that it's day 185 since she's moved from Hawkins, and she's writing to Mike to tell him about her day. Joyce works from home in her new job as a salesperson, and Elle seems to be settling into her new school, and she writes that she's looking forward to seeing Mike over spring break. Unfortunately, it does look like she's being bullied, and she's painting a nicer picture of her school life to Mike than what it really is. Robin and Steve are still friends, and Steve is having some issues with girls, not sure whether to commit since he's going off to college anyway. Robin also has a crush on someone named Vicky. Steve is trying to get Robin to take a chance and ask Vicky out because he's sure that she likes girls too, but Robin isn't so sure. Lucas is on the basketball team now, and his social status at school might be improving. He tells Dustin and Mike that he's tired of being bullied, and being on the basketball team means that he'll be in with the cool kids. Lucas is still a member of their Dungeons and Dragons club, Hellfire, but he won't be able to make it to their big campaign because this is going to be the same evening as his big basketball game. This causes some tension, but Mike and Dustin will have to find a substitute. Erica, Lucas's little sister, ends up being a worthy addition to their team. Joyce gets a package in the mail, and it's a doll. A Russian-looking doll, and there's also some Russian-sounding music in the background. Max looks like she's not really hanging out too much with the boys. She goes to see the school counselor, and we learn that it's a regular weekly thing. Her mom is working 2 jobs, and she drinks, but she tells the guidance counselor that things are otherwise a little better at home. We get a flashback then of when she witnessed her brother Billy getting killed, so she's been struggling with the trauma of that, and she suffers from headaches and nightmares. Lucas tries to reach out to her, but Max refuses the help. Later, when she's in the bathroom, she overhears one of the cheerleaders, Chrissy, being sick. Chrissy seems to be fighting her own demons. She's having some pretty nightmarish hallucinations about her mother. At one point, Chrissy goes into the forest and she hallucinates a clock on the tree. Turns out she's there to buy some weed from Eddie. They end up getting along quite a bit. Meanwhile, Elle is getting quite tormented by her bullies, and at one point she tries to use her powers in a moment of frustration in retaliation, and she realizes that she doesn't have them, or she remembers that she doesn't have them. This just makes the kids laugh at her harder, and Will is there to comfort her. He's been a pretty good sibling, kind of looking out for her because she is having a difficult time at school. Joyce cracks open the doll, and in it she finds a ransom-style note. The letter's all cut out from a magazine saying that Harper is alive. Meanwhile at school, Lucas scores the winning shot in the basketball game. That evening while she's feeding her dog, Max sees Chrissy go into Eddie's trailer. Chrissy had said to Eddie earlier that she wanted something stronger than weed, and while she's in his trailer, she's still hallucinating, and all these hallucinations have to do with her mother haunting her. When Eddie comes out with the stuff, he sees that Chrissy is non-responsive. She's just standing there with her eyes flickering, and then she starts levitating. She ends up on the roof with her limbs in different directions, similar to the way the kids at the Hawkins lab were attacked. In episode 2, we go back to the moment where Hopper kind of sacrificed himself to save the town. Obviously, we see that he survived the encounter after all, only to be captured and tortured by some Russians. The police arrive at Eddie's trailer, surveying the damage of what happened the night before, the scene of Chrissy's murder. Max, who is the next door neighbor, catches a glimpse of Chrissy's cheerleader jacket, and since she saw Chrissy go into the trailer, she strongly suspects that this is her body. Mike, meanwhile, has left Hawkins and he has arrived to visit Elle. We see that Murray has also arrived and he's headed to Joyce's house as well. Max tells Dustin that she saw a glimpse of Chrissy at Eddie's trailer, and this information about her identity is not public yet, by the way. Even though the news is out that there has been a murder, nobody knows that it's Chrissy. Max also tells Dustin that something else happened that night. There were flickering lights, she heard a scream, and she saw Eddie run out of the house, rushing to his car, and he drove off. She tells Dustin that Eddie looked pretty scared. While Max doesn't rule out that Eddie might have killed Chrissy at first, she and Dustin do acknowledge the possibility that something else might have killed her, and that's why Eddie was just so spooked. He didn't do anything, but he did see something. While Murray doesn't buy it, Joyce is convinced that the letter is legit and that Hopper somehow survived and that he's trying to send her a message. Chrissy's boyfriend Jason gets questioned by the police. He swears that Chrissy could not have been buying drugs from Eddie because she was pretty straight edge. He says that he last saw her after the game and he goes into the woods. It looks as though his anger is going to trigger something, some kind of transformation, but he doesn't. He's just really angry and he lets off steam and he screams into the woods. Elle takes Mike to the roller rink and she pretends that her bullies are actually her friends and that she has this fun life and hangs out there all the time. Will does tell Mike though that Elle has been having issues. The group also bullies her at the roller rink and they publicly humiliate her. Later, Elle whacks Angela in the face with a roller skate, and when Will and Mike ask her what she's done, she has the flashback to that moment in the lab when Dr. Brenner asked her what she'd done, seemingly killed everybody at the lab. Joyce calls the number on the letter, and the person says that he'll need $40,000 and she'll need to make the drop in Alaska. They'll trade the money for Hopper. Murray figures that the guy on the phone is likely some kind of warden or guard and he is able to release Hopper in some way. We see then that the military or some government organization is brought in to deal with Chrissy's suspicious death. Chrissy's boyfriend Jason and his basketball friends think that Eddie's Hellfire Club is actually some kind of satanic cult and that Eddie has something to do with it. He mobilizes his group of friends to do something about it. Nancy is covering the story about this gruesome murder and for her newspaper, and she talks to a man who is convinced that Eddie did not do this. I believe this is Eddie's uncle. He then asks Nancy if she's ever heard of a man named Victor Creel. Back in the day, Victor killed his whole family, took their eyes out. Maybe he got out and he's active again. He's supposed to be locked away in prison though. Fred, Nancy's colleague, who works at the paper with her, is also in the area and he wanders off into the forest and he sees some zombies who scream murderer at him. You see, this is his trauma of having survived a car crash and it keeps coming back to him in the form of these waking dreams. Dustin and the gang find Eddie hiding out. Eddie tells them about what happened that night to Chrissy, but he thinks that he's crazy and nobody will believe him until Dustin and Max tell him about the Upside Down. Dustin eventually realizes that what happened to Chrissy was like a curse, Vecna's curse. Vecna being a dark wizard and a creature of great power. At the end of the episode, we see that Vecna has come for Fred just like he came for Chrissy. Vecna tells Fred that he wants Fred to join him and Fred starts floating in the air like Chrissy did the night before. In episode 3, a helicopter lands on a married couple's property and it's the military. They show the man who lives in the house, Sam, who is a doctor, photos of Chrissy. They describe that it was as though she was attacked by a ghost because the attacker left no signs behind. Sam tells the military guy that something's going on in Hawkins and military strength is not going to work. The military man then suggests that this has something to do with Elle, and the doctor might have something to do with this as well. They suspect that he might even be hiding her. They end up taking some of Sam's belongings and they're going to dig into his communications in the hopes that he'll lead them to Elle. Lucas joins his basketball friends as they decide to go and look for Eddie. His friends do reassure him that they won't kill him or anything. The police meanwhile find Fred in the middle of the road and Nancy is assured by them that Victor Creel is still locked up. Mike tries to talk to Elle and tells her that he can relate to being bullied, but Elle is really going through it. She feels a kind of distance from Mike and she tells him that he doesn't even say that he loves her. She feels as though she doesn't belong anywhere. Just then, there's a knock at the door and the police have come for Elle, or Jane as she's known, because of the roller skate incident. She's cuffed and taken down to the police station in a car and, oh no, this is going to put her on the radar of some very bad people. We also see that there's a crack opening up on the roof of Eddie's trailer and it connects to the Upside Down where Vecna is in some kind of slumber, but he's filtering through people's misery as though he might be looking for his next victim to prey on. And then suddenly one of the basketball guys, Patrick, in the car gets an intense headache and a nosebleed. He's next. The basketball guys go over to Eddie's bandmates' home, the guys from Hellfire, and pretty much beat information out of the guys. Lucas denies even knowing these guys because he wants to shed his nerdy image, so he stands by when his basketball mates beat up his old friend, but you can see that he's very upset by this and that it's wrong. Elle is being questioned down at the station and it's not going well. She ends up being sent to a van to transfer her to juvie, and while on the road to juvie, the police car driving Elle is stopped and Dr. Sam steps out of the car. Max goes to her guidance counselor to try and get some answers about Chrissy, but of course her counselor isn't going to give out information about other students. Max then decides to steal her keys. I'm not sure if this was the plan all along. Lucas tells his basketball teammates that he knows where Eddie is hiding. You see, he'd radioed Dustin earlier, and Dustin and the gang had updated Lucas on Eddie's whereabouts and that he's safe. Lucas seems as though he might have a plan though. Nancy and Robin are doing some research about Victor at the library, and they find something, an old newspaper article that says that Victor claimed that his family home was haunted and that a demon killed his family and took their eyes out. Victor had said at the time that he was spared as punishment. Now that Max has the keys, the gang break into the counselor's office and they see that not only was Chrissy seeing the counselor, but Fred was as well. Max reads their files and she sees that she's been having some of the same symptoms as both Fred and Chrissy. The nosebleed, the nightmares, the headaches. And just then, she hears Vecna calling her name. She walks out into the hall and she sees the same clock that both Fred and Chrissy saw. At the end of the episode, Sam tells Elle that Hawkins is in danger and that she's fought it before, and she might be their only chance to defeat this thing again. Elle mentions that she doesn't have her powers, but there is a way to restore her abilities and make her stronger than before, Dr. Sam says. So she should go with him, which she does. So in episode 4, Dr. Sam's people are working for the good branch of the government who are trying to save Hawkins and protect Elle. They brief the boys about her, that they're trying to save the town, so the boys can't say anything. They also give Mike a letter written by Elle saying that she's going to be a superhero again, so she's gone voluntarily. Max tells the group about the grandfather clock that she saw in the hallway that has since disappeared because she was hallucinating it in her waking dream. Her friends figure out then that she was in the same trance that Chrissy was in, and she also tells them that she's been having these visions. Lucas shows up to the school then and tells the group that the basketball guys are looking for Dustin and that they're in danger. Well, the guys are actually looking for Eddie, but now they know that Dustin knows of Eddie's whereabouts. Jason and his friends aren't letting up either. They even go to Lucas's house to try and get some information out of his little sister Erica, but as usual, she's not really having it. Nancy comes up with a plan to pretend to be scholars in order to get access to Victor at his institution. He could have some valuable information as the only known survivor of Vecna. She and Robin go to the institution and their plan works. They finally get to him and ask him for his help, telling him that the creature that killed his family is back. Max gives all of the boys letters and she says that they're a failsafe in case she can't be saved from Vecna. She also leaves some letters for her family and she goes to say goodbye to her mom. And even this encounter with her mom ends with Vecna telling her that her time is almost up. Joyce and Murray go to the meeting spot to see Yuri, the guy who they're going to give the $40,000 to. Hopper, meanwhile, has momentarily escaped from the prison labor camp. The kids who were at Joyce's house were told to stay there because Hawkins isn't safe, and there have been some officers posted there to make sure that they're okay, but suddenly people start shooting into the home, obviously trying to get at Elle. It's basically the good government people versus the bad government people. The kids managed to get away with one of the cops, but he did get hit. Yuri ends up betraying everyone. Enzo for being a corrupt cop/guard for being prepared to help a prisoner escape. Joyce and Murray because they're Americans wanted by the KGB and they're high value. And Harper, who is worth more now that he's an escaped prisoner. Yuri decides that he can get an even bigger payday by betraying all of them. Victor eventually tells Robin and Nancy his story. Back in the day, he moved into a home using money left to him by a relative. His daughter loved the house, but his son sensed something because he was quite sensitive in that way. Eventually, things started dying around the house, mostly animals. Then Vecna started giving them waking nightmares. First, Vecna took his wife and then his children, who he tried to save but couldn't. He says that he tried to follow them, but the demon wouldn't let him. Max goes to her brother Billy's grave and she reads her letter to him. She says she feels she died that day that he did, and she expresses her regret at not having been able to do anything about it but stand there. She apologizes to him, and suddenly she goes into a trance, only the whites of her eyes showing, and Steve can't wake her. Billy is in her hallucination at first, making her feel guilty for wanting him to die, and while the guys try to wake her and figure out what to do, Max finally meets Vecna again. Robin figures out that music might be the lifeline that brings someone back, based on something that Victor had said. They walkie-talkie the information to Dustin, who is with Steve, Lucas, and Max. They need to play her favorite song in order to pull her out. When they do, we see that a gate or a portal opens up, and Max, who is about to be killed by Vecna, sees the portal, and the memory of her friends also make it possible for her to escape, and she finally makes it back to them. By the way, while Max was inside, she reached another dimension or another place that Vecna seemed extra protective of. All of his victims were on display there. In episode 5, the police guy ends up dying from the bullet wound and the kids aren't able to save him. After they bury him in the desert, they find that the phone number that the guy was unable to give them with his dying breath to find Elle was in his pen. They call the number and they hear what sounds like an internet connection tone, and Mike says that they're calling a computer, but if they could find the computer, they could probably save Elle. Of course, the only person they know who might be able to help with all this is Dustin's girlfriend, who is a hacker. Meanwhile, at Joyce's house, the head military guy finds Elle's note to Mike, and he asks one of the surviving officers where she is. Elle is in Nevada, and Dr. Sam has taken her to an underground bunker designed to withstand Elle's power. Dr. Brenner is there as well, claiming to want to help, but when Elle sees him, she runs away. She is then sedated. Hopper, who had momentarily escaped, is captured and thrown in jail again, and that's where he sees Enzo, who tells him that they've been betrayed by Yuri. Max is over at Nancy's house, and they're keeping an eye on her as she draws where she says she was. She says that it feels easier than explaining it. Nancy sees something in the disjointed drawing pieces, and she starts assembling the pieces of the drawing, and it's Victor Creel's house. They all go to the house and they see that same clock that Chrissy, Fred, and Max all saw in their visions. Nancy and Steve also have a kind of unintentionally tender moment in the house. Eddie, meanwhile, is still in the house, and the basketball jocks have tracked him down, although they haven't found him yet. They eventually do as he's trying to escape by boat. They literally jump into the water and go after him, but just then, Patrick gets killed by Vecna. Elle wakes up in her bed at the facility underground in the Nevada desert, and her head is shaved again. When she walks around, she sees the other kids there, just like when she was a little girl. She's put into the sensory deprivation tank, but they soon have to pull her out because it seems as though her body is rejecting her powers or something. At this point, she wants out. She has for a while, and she uses her powers to take out the soldiers who try and stop her from escaping. But at the end of the episode, when she tries to use her powers on Dr. Brenner, she voluntarily goes back with him, calling him Papa again for the first time. Although she does realize that she has no other option but to go back with him, so this isn't really a choice. In episode 6, the police arrive and they question Jason about what happened to Patrick. Jason thinks that Eddie is a vessel for Satan, and that's how he had powers, which he used to lift Patrick out of the water. The police seem to think that Jason is likely traumatized with a touch of religious fanaticism. They obviously don't believe his story. Dr. Brenner tells Elle that her abilities are still in her. They just need to find a way to repair some of the broken signals that make her lose them, and he likens her losing her powers to what happens to the brain when somebody suffers a stroke, but she can learn to regain them again. She tells him then that she saw part of another memory, the one where she seemed to have killed everyone at the Institute, and Dr. Brenner says that it's because of these memories, these demons in her, that they have to be very careful because they don't want to lose her again. The police in Hawkins hold a town hall and announce that Patrick was killed and that Eddie is a person of interest. Jason burst into the town hall and he tells the crowd that he saw things that the police can't explain or that they won't believe. Jason hands out pamphlets and tells the town that Eddie is a leader of a cult and they need to protect the town. And this seems to work because some of the townspeople are getting ready to be vigilantes in order to find the so-called killer possessed by Satan. The gang eventually makes it to Susie, Dustin's girlfriend's house, and she uses her computer genius to help them. Joyce and Murray eventually escape from Yuri, who had captured them and was going to bring them in. They still need his help getting to the secret location of the prison, though. They eventually all trek over there in the snow. One of the orderlies at Elle's institution talks to her and tells her that sometimes Papa doesn't tell the truth. He asks her if he has a memory that makes her happy and sad at the same time. And this reminds her of the memory of her mother. This could help fuel her power. This memory helps Elle as she becomes pretty strong and she can use her powers again, and she passes a test. You see, up until this point, all of the kids were stronger than her, but she manages to overpower one of them. Dr. Brenner finds out that the orderly helped though, and the guy is tortured. Elle also gets teased by the guy she overpowered in training, and they all gang up on her and threaten to kill her. Because this isn't the way things were supposed to go. She was always supposed to be the weak one, and now his position in their little hierarchy is threatened. Dustin and Steve eventually find Eddie, and the group decides that they need to find a way into Vecna's lair to kill him, and Dustin realizes that his compass has been acting up. If there is a stronger magnetic field, the compass's needle will point in that direction, so they decide to follow the compass. Eventually they get to a lake, and Steve jumps into the lake at one point, and he does find the entrance to Vecna's lair. Unfortunately, he doesn't make it out of the water on time, and he gets pulled in. Nancy jumps in after him, Robin jumps in after her, and then Eddie kind of jumps/falls in. At the end of the episode, Steve is in Vecna's lair, in the Upside Down, and he's getting strangled and pecked by these demon bat bird looking creatures as he tries to fight for his life. In episode 7, the final episode, Nancy, Robin and Eddie arrive and they help Steve fight off the creatures. He's pretty banged up though, and Nancy helps bandage his wounds. There's another tender moment between them. So since the Upside Down is Hawkins, they decide to find Nancy's house because Nancy says that she has guns in her room and this could help them in their fight. The guy being tortured for information on Elle's whereabouts is about to be subjected to another round of it, and it looks like he's about to crack. He just begs them not to kill her or not to hurt her. Sam is getting upset because this thing with Elle trying to get her powers back just isn't quite working. Elle is frightened and traumatized, and Hawkins is running out of time. Elle's also kind of just regressing and she can't cope with what she thinks that she's done. She thinks she's a monster. Later, Dr. Brennan tells the other kids that he knows that Elle has a concussion and he wants to know who caused it. The kid who did it gets a shock collar put on him, and Brenner basically tortures the truth out of him because Elle refuses to tell. They had threatened to kill her if she told, after all. Eddie tells Steve how Nancy jumped into the lake after Steve, and to him that is true love. Dustin eventually figures he has a theory about Vecna's motive, that he isn't only killing his victims, but he's making a psychic connection with them so powerful that it's able to rip a hole through space and time. He's opening gates for the Mind Flayer who wants to take over the world. Nancy, Robin, Eddie and Steve all get to Nancy's house and they realize they're actually in 1983. The day that Will went missing. They're in the past, and that's why there aren't any guns at Nancy's house. They do figure that they can communicate with Dustin though when they see a light surrounded by the upside down dusk particles. The lights on Dustin's side start flickering, spelling out SOS, and they communicate and eventually decide to get their bikes and all ride to Eddie's trailer because there are gates to the upside down at the murder sites, and Chrissy was killed in Eddie's trailer. Elle plays chess with the orderly and he tells her that this is all part of Papa's plan to kill Elle. Everything that's been happening with the bullies, the fact that the security cameras were turned off during the bullying, it's all a setup. Papa knows that he can't control Elle and that she is more powerful than the others. The orderly tells Elle that she needs to escape and he gives her his key card, telling her that it's time that she's free from this hell. Elle wants to help the orderly escape as well, so she removes the tracking chip in his neck, which allows him to use his powers again, and he takes out a couple of security guys and they're planning their escape. Yuri, Joyce and Murray meanwhile all get to the prison facility and they see that the prisoners, one of whom is Hopper, are being made to fight the Mind Flayer creature. Hopper and Enzo, he's the man with no name from Game of Thrones, I believe, managed to narrowly escape, and then Hopper sees that Joyce came for him and they have an emotional embrace and reunion. In Eddie's trailer, he points them to the spot where Chrissy died, and in the real trailer, Dustin ends up opening a portal on his side and they can see each other. The Upside Down kids start climbing through. Robin and Eddie get through to Eddie's real trailer, but as Nancy starts climbing, Vecna gets to her and then she becomes stuck. Vecna starts torturing her with the memory of Bob's death, and by the way, Steve was going to climb in after Nancy, so it's assumed that he's still stuck in Eddie's Upside Down trailer and he's going to go after Nancy. Vecna takes Nancy into Victor's house, and this is where the storyline kind of converges with what's happening between Elle and the orderly. We find out that Victor's son Henry is the orderly, and that the orderly was number one. So Henry, while he was a child, was kind of odd and a loner, and he found some spiders in the house and became rather connected with them. He's narrating his story, he's narrating his life story to Elle while Nancy is walking through it. He, young Henry, was the one who killed his mother and sister, and his father was taken in and blamed for those murders, and one says that this was his intention, so it wasn't Vecna. That's when Papa found Henry and wanted to replicate his powers in others. Henry was Papa's first test subject, and that's how the program was born. Brenner eventually blocked Henry's powers because he realized that he couldn't control Henry. Elle also realizes that he was the one who killed all of those kids, not her. He's also just killed everyone in the facility now, so he's definitely not an ally. He invites her to shape the world with him, and she says no. That's when he starts to do to her what Vecna does to his victims, pull them up into the air and break all of their limbs, but Elle is able to fight back, and she eventually uses her powers to incinerate him, and she opens a door to the Upside Down, and he's sent back there where his skin is basically stripped, and we see how he becomes Vecna, and we see the number one on his wrist. He is Vecna. Anyway, that's it for this video. Feel free to share your thoughts, and thank you for watching.